Hello again and welcome back to World Talks. Anna Kalczyńska. In what has been described as a historic moment in the country's foreign policy, Italy shifts its approach to Asia. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is on a high-stakes strategic mission to the region. The Italian government is treating the visit as an opportunity to shape European Union's influence in Central Asia and offset pressure from Russia and China. Could this ambitious move bring any positive fruits for the EU and Italy itself? To elaborate on this possible outcome of this visit, we talked to Bruce Pannier, board member of the Caspian Policy Center. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So I understand Asia seems to be at the center of attention amid uncertainties on global supply chains and trade. So what exactly is at play here?
Well, of course, Central Asia has vast reserves of oil, natural gas, and now we're finding out that they have an abundance of critical raw materials too that people need. So there's a number of reasons to go there and be looking for business opportunities at the moment. The EU has certainly been one of the foremost in going out there. Meloni's trip to Central Asia is just the latest in several visits that we've seen this year. Including the first EU C5 summit that was in Samarkand recently. Other officials have visited out there. So, there's an abundance of materials that's very necessary for the European Union, for Italy, that are available in Central Asia. They're all trying to lock down what they can.
All right. So Meloni's trip includes stops in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, culminating in the first ever Italy-Central Asia summit in Astana. So why is Rome pursuing deeper ties with exactly those two countries, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan?
Well, those are the biggest countries in Central Asia and economically the most powerful at the moment. So it's not just Italy, but it's other countries that have pretty much identified those two Central Asian nations as being the ones that they want to do business with. Now, in the case of Italy, I should note that Italian oil companies have a long history of dealing with Kazakhstan. And so a lot of the oil that Kazakhstan is shipping currently westward, and that's about 80% of their oil goes out to the west, ends up in terminals in Italy for distribution to other European nations, Germany, Austria, Czech Republic. So on paper, Italy is actually the third largest trade partner of Kazakhstan at the moment. And a lot of that has to do with these oil shipments. But it's not just Italy that benefits from those oil shipments. Again, it's other European Union countries.
Okay, so and how about Europe? What can Europe offer to Asia? And what is Asia seeking to achieve from this trip?
Well, there's a number of things that Europe can offer Asia and has been offering Asia in the moment. I mean, I mentioned that Italian oil companies are big investors in Kazakhstan's oil industry. They're also investing in other industries around Central Asia at the moment. Certainly, we've mentioned critical raw materials at the start. This is something that European countries are uniquely positioned to help Central Asian countries with. China, of course, is a big player in this too. What the Central Asians are looking for is not just development and extraction of these materials. What they want is for the investors to come and build the facilities to process the materials. And the European Union has been, very, very forward in showing up in these countries and saying we want to find these materials, we want to get them up out of the ground, and we're going to build the plants and necessary infrastructure for you to process them so that you sell a finished product and not a raw material. So this is very appealing to Central Asia. Obviously, there's more money involved in these kind of things. So, the European Union's been courting the Central Asians very successfully in doing this, and they have the know-how. A lot of countries would like to invest in critical raw materials from Central Asia, but they just don't have the experience to do these kind of things. So, it's very important for the Central Asians to have European partners. Then they don't want to get too much in debt to China. A lot of these countries are in debt to China in Central Asia. So what they want is to diversify their partnerships, so to speak. And the European Union is ideally positioned for this.
Okay, so we talk investment, we talk economy, but how about a broader picture, how this could influence potentially a situation on a global scene, especially with regard to Russia?
Well, Russia is There's not much Russia can do about this at the moment. It's fortunate for the Central Asians and also fortunate for Europe that they're trying to develop new trade routes because of the European Union sanctions on Russia. They've been developing new trade routes, and there's one, the Middle Corridor. It's called by some people the Trans-Caspian transport route, by others, but it's the same route essentially. And China wants to trade with Europe without violating the sanctions to the greatest degree possible, which means avoiding Russia. So China is helping to push these trade routes through Central Asia to Europe. And that's obviously already this has had a great effect. And Europe is much better connected to Central Asia than it was 3 years ago. But there's not much Russia can do about this, even though they're displeased with the way things have fallen out. But the fact that the Chinese are pushing this through and are helping to fund some of this and have for almost 2 decades now, they've been trying to get routes through Central Asia, both to the Middle East and to Europe. And so there's really not a lot Russia can do about this. They're not happy, but at the moment they just have to sit back and kind of endure it, because to be angry with these routes would be, by extension, to be angry with Chinese policies toward trade. And the Chinese are in a position where they don't really have to listen to this. So in the end, Central Asia will be less connected to Russia, better connected to Europe, and there's nothing that Moscow can do about it.
Following the leaders of China, Japan and other European countries in visiting the region in recent weeks, Emmanuel Macron also paid a visit to Asia. Do you see this as some kind of a race between, diplomatic race between the two leaders, Meloni and Macron, and the two EU countries?
I suppose there's some competition there, but I have a feeling a lot of this is done in coordination. As I mentioned, the European Union has been involved in something of a diplomatic and trade offensive in Central Asia for this year, and actually before that, but certainly this year it's been very visible. And so I have a feeling a lot of these visits are done with the full knowledge of other partners in the European Union. They coordinate their policies. They talk about what they're looking for in these different regions. I'd mentioned that Italy, of course, is getting a lot of the oil from Kazakhstan. Now, when Macron meets with Kazakh leader, what he's looking for is uranium. And Aramco, the French company, has been heavily involved, back to the days when it was Oriva, has been involved in Kazakhstan. We know that the French have nuclear power plants, and they're looking for sources, especially with Mali now being kind of questionable. So, that conversation is about uranium, but it's also about European Union policies and European Union partnerships for Kazakhstan. And overall, the European Union is the largest investor and trade partner of Kazakhstan. I mentioned that Italy is number 3 just on its own. So it's easy to imagine that the European Union combined is a huge trade partner for Kazakhstan, and not just Kazakhstan. Uzbekistan, we mentioned at the start, that's another one where the European Union has a higher and higher profile all the time. So when Macron visits and when Meloni visits, or when any European Union, or any leader of a European Union country visits, you can be sure that at some point or another, they have been in touch with other leaders in the European Union, in touch with people in Brussels to find out what they can forward, what policy or partnership they can move on when they are in Central Asia meeting with these leaders.
We understand Rome is seeking to expand its influence through direct political engagement, but also security cooperation and targeted economic partnerships. But can you imagine leaders of Asia countries being more involved in diplomatic actions vis-à-vis Ukraine?
Well, no, this is a tough one. Certainly in the case of Central Asia, they're walking the tightrope here. They have been very careful to neither show approval or great dissatisfaction with what's happening in Ukraine. Now, in the back of their minds, they have to be very concerned about Russia's moves in Ukraine, because there's been a lot of rhetoric coming out of Moscow and other places in Russia about the reforming the Soviet Union, historic Russian lands, things like that. Well, Central Asia was part of the Russian Empire, and it was also part of the Soviet Union. So they're quietly unhappy about what's happening in Ukraine, but they can't really voice that because, of course, Russia borders, especially Kazakhstan. Russia directly borders Kazakhstan, 7,800 kilometers of border, right? So you have to be very careful what you do with the policies. Are they happy in Central Asia about Ukraine? Again, that they aren't, but they have a very narrow space in which they can move in this. They are courting better partnerships with other countries, and that's been effective. China is a huge partner for Central Asia. It has been for more than 25 years now. The Arab states in the Middle East have been upping their relationship with Central Asia, and so is the European Union. Now, there's really not much that Moscow can do about that as long as the Central Asians are seen to be not totally breaking rank and casting in their lot with the critics of Moscow's policies. That might be a little bit too far to go. So, like I said, it's a very fragile kind of diplomatic dance that they're doing at the moment to try to keep on Moscow's good side while at the same time making sure that no matter what happens in Ukraine, when it's all over, they're in a much stronger position to deal with other countries and resist pressure from the Kremlin.
And what could be the impact of those diplomatic efforts, of this diplomatic mission on the part of EU leaders on the relations between Asia and China?
Well, this is, right at the moment, there's a lot of things in play in the world. It's not, in the big picture of politics, there's also the United States to consider right now, and the policies of the current administration are very unclear. It's not, no one can say for certain what it'll be next month or next year. So the European Union also has to deal with China as a potential, it is a huge trade partner at the moment, but it might of necessity become a much more important trade partner. Now, Central Asia, as I mentioned, they have these trade links that are going through, new railways, new roads that go through, they're improving the ports and the shipping across the Caspian Sea through the South Caucasus and over to the Black Sea so they can supply Europe. So there's a lot of things that the European Union is doing to help Central Asian countries, fulfill that role, for one thing, be more sovereign, more independent. But they're working with China, to do this. So there is a new bond in EU-Chinese relationships that are coming out of this too. But again, this is a balancing act. The European Union wants good ties with China, certainly. They want the Central Asians to have good ties with China, but not become subordinate or fall totally under the influence of China at the same time. I mean, they want trade partners. There are some advantages. One I should mention real quick, because I know we only have limited time, is that when the Central Asian states are dealing with the European Union, it's much more comfortable for them. And I've been at some of these meetings before. When the Central Asian states deal with the United States or Russia or China, they're dealing with a huge superpower level country, one country. With the European Union, they're dealing with a number of countries, and of course the connections with Europe and Central Asia go back thousands of years. Alexander the Great, if we want to go way back into history, but it's a group of countries that are dealing with a group of countries, and within that framework, you can deal with them as a bloc, the European Union or the C5 in Central Asia, or individually you can deal from country to country, as we've seen with Meloni's visit to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And Central Asian leaders, of course, I think Kazakh leader, the Uzbek leader, and the Turkmen, the actual head of Turkmenistan, have all been to France this year, too. So, it's a much more comfortable relationship for them to deal with. And it gives the European Union a lot of advantages, not only because of the group of countries in the bloc that I mentioned, but also because there are countries in the European Union that were part of the Soviet Union. So there's also a link there, the Baltic states.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Bruce Pannier, board member at Caspian Policy Center. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your insights here with us on TVP World. Have a good day, and thank you so much for watching World News and World Talks. Please stay tuned to TVP World for more coverage.